It's a magic number. Yes, it is. It's a magic number. Because 2 times 3 is
6.
And 3 times 6 is
18.
And the 18th letter of the alphabet is
R.
We got 3 R's we're gonna talk about today. You gotta learn to reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Well, if you're going to the market to buy some juice, you gotta bring your own bags. You gotta learn to reduce your waste.
You gotta learn to reduce.
And if your brother or your sister got some cool clothes, you could try them on before you buy some more of those.
Reuse. We gotta learn to reuse.
And if the first 2 R's don't work out and you gotta make some trash, don't throw it out.
Recycle. We gotta learn to recycle.
We gotta learn to reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Plus 3 is the magic number.
Yes, it is. It's a magic.
We gotta reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Cigarettes, candy wrappers too. I see them lying in the grass, and I get the blues. I get the green blues. Oh, I get the green blues. I get the green blues. Oh, 'cause somebody's trashing our planet. Oh, they're building up a building a mile away from me. But why'd they have to cut down every single tree?
Every single
I get the green blues, oh. I get the green blues, oh. I get the green blues, oh. When someone is trashing our planet. There's a Brookhaven town dump high on a hill.
On a hill.
There's a component monster.
It's a monster
called an Asheville.
An Asheville.
Incinerated non-recyclables are incinerated to ash. The ash is brought back to Brookhaven.
To Brookhaven.
Their schools and backyards it is stashed.
It's stashed.
Neighbors and activists, they want it closed. But where do we put our garbage? Solutions have got to be bold. I got the green blues, oh. I get the green blues, oh. I get the green blues, oh. When somebody's trashing our planet. I get the green blues, oh, when someone is trashing our planet.
Woo! Thank you. What a perfect start for our service this morning. Thanks to Ron Elgato, Posnack, and Tom Pelletier for sharing their musical gifts and hard work this morning, along with our behind the camera tech team for making all this happen. Good morning, dear friends, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Stony Brook. My name is Laura Lesch, and I am really delighted to be serving as the worship associate this morning with our service leader, Peggy Fort, and some of the other members of our social action committee, John Morris, Linda Michael, and Michelle Maggio. Our guest speaker is Dr. Abena Asare. We will be focusing on the environmental racism, which we are all contributing to with our trash. Our minister is Reverend Margie Allen, who is on vacation this week and next. Our Director of Religious Education is Deb Little, who runs our worship time for children each Sunday morning at 9:30. I want to offer a special welcome to any of you who are new to our services. We hope you will find our time together with us spiritual, informative, and inspirational. We are a congregation of seekers here who come from a variety of faith traditions, and we welcome others of all ages and identities who are looking for such a spiritual home. Please stay on with us following the service for a group time of meeting and greeting each other. Plus, this morning, we will have a special Q&A period with Dr. Asare. Then, if you would like to talk further with a small group of us and ask any questions you may have about our fellowship, leave this meeting and click on the link for the small group chats, which is on our website and in yesterday's newsfeed. Each week this month, there will be one small group chat room dedicated to a discussion of the proposal for an 8th principle with members of our Racial Concerns Committee. So if you would like to know more about this, please ask our small group host, Denise Stevenson, to place you into that chat room. During our annual pledge drive, which is now in progress, a member of our fellowship will be presenting a brief statement about why they choose to pledge their financial support. This week, Jessica Pond will share her UU minute after the chalice lighting. And last but not least, the entire Social Action Committee wants to give a public thank you to our brilliant director, Dan Weymouth. We have asked too much of him this week, believe me, and he went way above and beyond any reasonable expectation of his limited time and his limitless talent to make our vision for this service come to life. We cannot imagine where we would be without you, Dan, and we cannot say enough about how grateful we are.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Dan. Let us enter into the spirit of worship with the sounding of our morning bell. Our chalice lighting words this morning were written by Reverend Viola Abbott. As we light this chalice, may it serve to give us clarity of purpose and illumine our way as we set about doing the work of this congregation in commitment, in cooperation, and in love.
Hi, I'm Jessica Pond, and I've been a member of the UU Fellowship at Stony Brook for about 3 years. I grew up UU, but I fell out of congregational life after high school because between college and jobs, life just got too busy. But then thankfully 3 years ago, my sister Melissa and I decided we were more than ready to find a new fellowship. With the first service I attended at Stony Brook, I knew that this was a fellowship where I could find the spiritual connection I was looking for. Now, our fellowship gives me the opportunity to offer my voice in services, both in song and as a worship associate, and to offer my thoughts as a member of the board. I pledge because it has only been 3 short years, but this fellowship has become my spiritual home. And it's not just the building and our beautiful space from which we have been distant for so long. It is with this community of people that I find peace, spiritual growth, and so much love.
Thank you, Jessica. When environmentalism first became popular during the early 20th century, the focus was wilderness protection and wildlife preservation. These goals reflected the interest of the movement's initial primarily white middle and upper middle class supporters. They failed to appreciate the centuries-long work of indigenous communities who had lived without ushering in the types of environmental devastation these settler colonial environmentalists now sought to mitigate. Components of environmentalism were NIMBY, not in my backyard, and PIMBY, place in minorities' backyard principles. Locally unwanted land uses called LULUs were transferred from middle-class neighborhoods to poor communities with large minority populations. Environmental justice emerged as a concept in the US in the early 1980s and is described as a social movement that focuses on the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. The US Environmental Protection Agency in 1992 defined environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Environmental discrimination is one issue that environmental justice seeks to address. The combined impact of racism and discrimination against minorities is why we find waste management, landfills, incinerators, and other potentially toxic facilities located in communities of color. Today, we have the opportunity to confront environmental racism here on Long Island in Brookhaven Town by joining and promoting the efforts of BLARG. We must be vigilant and demand that people of color from the North Bellport community who are members of BLARG are included in any future planning committees our town creates. This has not been true even in the recent past, as reflected in the task force the town created.
Thank you, Peggy. Let us get ready for this morning's meditation time. Please settle comfortably in your chair. Relax your body. Scan for any stress, especially in your shoulders. Relax your shoulders. Tell yourself, shoulders down. Deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Close your eyes if you wish. After my words, you may choose to open your eyes and see on your screen a drop of perfectly pure water, the kind of water that should be available to every person on our earth, every farmer, executive, high priest, refugee, every child, parent, elder, every person from every race and all cultures and religions. We should try to honor the true beauty of this water. Know its life-giving sustenance for all creatures and living organisms on our planet. Honor this water by keeping it safe, safe from those who would jeopardize its purity, safe from those who would waste its abundance. Deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. We will now have a period of silent meditation, which will end with hymn number 299, Make Channels for the Streams of Love. Aho, blessed be, amen, namaste.
Thank you to Bethany Riddle, Jessica and Melissa Pond, and Dan Weymouth for their beautiful and inspiring rendition of one of our favorite hymns, as well as to Bill Steedle for his breathtaking photograph of that pure drop of water. This week, the offering is our regular opportunity. The weekly offering is our regular opportunity for the spiritual practice of generosity. Every month, one of our social justice committees chooses a local organization working for social justice with which we share this collection according to how you indicate you want your donation applied in the memo line on your check or your online payment. Our Share the Plate recipient for the month of April, in honor of Earth Day, is the Sweetbriar Nature Center. Sweetbriar is located on 54 acres of varied garden, woodland, field, and wetland habitats on the Nessequag River. It is home to hundreds of species of plants and animals. The mission of the organization is twofold: to provide natural science education for services for people of all ages, and to provide native wildlife rehabilitation services. During the pandemic, they have been providing programming via Zoom. They have been providing programming via Zoom, and this spring, they have been able to open again to elementary school children. Please support this very special local organization engaged in caring for our earthly ecosystems. You can use the link posted in the chat right now as you enjoy our offertory music, or click on the donate button on our website at uufsb.org. Your gifts to this fellowship and our social justice partners will be most gratefully received and really put to good use.
Mother, there's far too many of you crying.
And brother, there's far too many of you dying. Well, you know we've got to find a way
To bring some love in here today, yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate.
'Cause you know war is not the answer, and only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way
to bring some love in here today, yeah. Picket lines
and picket signs.
Don't punish me
With brutality.
Ooh, talk to me
So you can see
what's going on.
what's going on,
What's going on?
what's going on.
Whoa. Have mercy, mercy me.
Things ain't what they used to be.
Where did all the blue skies go? Poison in the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Oh, have mercy, mercy me.
Things ain't what they used to be.
What about this overcrowded land? How much more abuse from man can't you stand? Oh, picket lines.
And picket signs.
Don't punish me.
With your brutality.
Ooh, talk to me.
so you can see
What's going on?
what's going on.
What's going on?
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 Indeed, what's going on? With that gripping musical question as our segue, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker this morning, Dr. Abena Asare. Dr. Asare is a longtime friend of our fellowship. She is an associate professor of Africana Studies and History at Stony Brook University. Her research and writings span questions of human rights, citizenship, and transformative justice in Africa and the African diaspora, and her work has been widely published and awarded. Her first book, Truth Without Reconciliation, A Human Rights History of Ghana, was chosen as a Choice Outstanding Academic Title in 2018 by the American Library Association. She has also been a member leader of the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group, better known locally as BLARG, which recently led the successful public effort to block the planned expansion of the ash landfill in North Bellport and promote its being closed by 2024.
Imagine that you live in a town of 500,000 people, bigger than many US cities, on a thin little island peninsula in the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine that the town's waste plan for the past 50 years has been landfilling garbage and then burning that garbage and landfilling the ash. Imagine that this town's landfill has a 50-year history of mismanagement and blight, including a leachate plume, federal and state air quality emissions violations, noxious smells, and public health concerns. Imagine that the community living closest to the landfill is a Black, Latinx, Indigenous, working class community with a high population of children, many under the age of 5. Imagine that this particular community adjacent to the landfill has the lowest life expectancy in all of Long Island. Then imagine that you are living in the midst of a climate crisis. Imagine that incineration, burning waste, is toxic and polluting. Imagine that new incinerators and ash fills are almost impossible to build in this country in this day and age. And so those that exist, usually placed decades ago next to communities of color and or poor communities, are expanded and refitted as the last gasps of a dying industry. Imagine that in 2017, a documentary was made about the adverse health outcomes of the students and staff at a public school near this landfill. Imagine that in the midst of the anguish and fear of the parents, teachers, and community members, town officials promised that the landfill would close down when it reached capacity in 2024. Then imagine that these same town officials do very little to plan for the closure of the landfill and instead apply for and win a state grant not to close the landfill, but to expand it by building a new ash fill next door to it. Imagine the community's mistrust, the frustration, the uncertainty. Then imagine that the community says enough is enough and closed means closed. Imagine that we say we will no longer accept the town's mismanagement and lack of planning, that we say human life is worth more than tipping fees, that in 2020 we can do more, we can do better than burn increasingly large amounts of garbage and fill up holes in the ground until they become mountains and then dig new holes next to the old ones again and again until the land spits us out. It's time. Enough is enough. Closed means closed. This was a social media post that I wrote in October before one of our landfill protests. Hopefully, if we have time in the Q&A afterwards, I can share the rest of the story about where the fight to close and clean up the Brookhaven landfill is right now. Thank you for inviting me back here today. I'm cognizant that there's a certain cyclical aspect to my return to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Stony Brook and to this pulpit. I'm grateful for your desire to remain in community with me as the years pass. I'm thankful to have the space to come, listen, and share again. In the past, you invited me to talk about the Black Lives Matter concept and about what it might mean in Eastern Long Island. Today, you've asked me here to talk about Earth Day as we approach the 51st anniversary of this holiday, and to share a little bit about my work as part of the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group, or BLARG. Before we march towards Earth Day and talk about BLARG, though, I have to return to one of our earlier meetings. I believe it was in the year 2016 when I first came to this pulpit to speak. When I was last here then, the fellowship was in the midst of some heavy discussion about a Black Lives Matter sign that kept on being stolen. A Black Lives Matter sign that made some of the fellowship's tenants and members concerned and fearful. A Black Lives Matter sign that spurred an intense discussion within this body about who you were and what that meant. In 2016, after I spoke, I remember some questions were raised about the fact that these three words strung together, Black Lives Matter, might be divisive, unnecessarily exclusive. These words, Black Lives Matter, some worried, sought to prioritize a particular population, to lift up a small slice of the human community above others. Now, these concerns are not unique to this fellowship, obviously. The retort, all lives matter, is a crystallization of this fear, this suspicion that Black Lives Matter is somehow standing in opposition to our shared humanity. So when we spoke in 2016, I tried my best to explain the vision of interlocked and interdependent freedom, buoying up these words, Black Lives Matter. I may have referenced the Combahee River Collective, a Black feminist socialist organization in the 1970s, who theorized it clearly when they explained that if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression, unquote. I'll say that again. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. The Black Lives Matter guiding principles geared toward explaining the BLM concept to children states this vision of interlocking freedom in this way: to love and desire justice for ourselves is a necessary prerequisite for wanting the same for others. Perhaps the simplest articulation of this idea that I've heard is a chant that you often hear at protests: all lives will matter when Black lives matter. Now, the difficult thing about accepting that a vision of interlocking freedom requires setting some priorities is that this flies in the face of everything we have been taught about how power actually works within our national history. What happens to my freedom? The All Lives Matter crowd wonders if I fight for and center the rights of someone else. This vision of an interlocked liberation seems unbelievable in a country like ours, founded on settler colonialism, forged through the transatlantic slave trade and built up on a steady diet of war and the pursuit of wealth. In a country like ours, power is usually mapped onto domination. And so there are those who hear the words Black Lives Matter and hear them through that lens. This can only be a trick, a way for Black folk to grab resources and power. Even those with more liberal sensibilities can often start to wring their hands, wondering whether the framing is too divisive and may lack traction. So even though our political heritage in the United States tells us that freedom is something to be hoarded and that our power comes from our ability to dominate resources, the earth that groans under the weight of our collective choices and history tells us another story. What is our responsibility in this season of floods and droughts, of wildfires and pandemics? The earth is teaching us a lesson, new lessons about where we are and when we are. We are being offered new priorities. As we confront a climate crisis that will not be denied, our inherited understandings of progress and power must shift. Part of what this past year has taught me is that given the time it is on the clock of the earth, there is no greater priority than community. So that is my topic for today, strategic community in the time of the climate crisis. And I will use my experience in BLARG to talk a little bit about what I mean by community and strategic community. So I'm a member of BLARG, a community coalition that has come together since the summer of 2020 in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder and in that summer of uprising. At that time, advocates and activists from North Belport came together to insist that Black Lives Matter must have a local agenda and that in Suffolk County, we could not say Black Lives Matter without also saying something about the Brookhaven landfill. The Brookhaven landfill, as I've often said, is a grave environmental injustice hiding in plain sight. In 1974, the landfill was built next to one of only 2 majority Black neighborhoods in Brookhaven town. And since then, the landfill has expanded and grown and has become a particular blight on the working class community of North Belport. There are 50 years of toxic odors, 50 years of complaints. The properties of North Belport have been impacted by their proximity to the landfill. The public school district has been impacted. This landfill has a long record of mismanagement. This has been a troubled site for decades. It has been fined by the US EPA for violating the Clean Air Act to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Something is wrong. And even as I say this, I also want to acknowledge the beauty and resilience of the North Belport community. There is so much innovation, so much talent, so much heart and history and pride and genius in this community. And the landfill is a limiting factor. It constrains the construction of affordable housing. It destabilizes the school district when staff leave because they're concerned about their health. It takes away people too soon. For all these reasons at BLARG, we center and prioritize the human experience of North Belport, the fence line community that has borne the brunt of the region's waste needs for the past 5 decades. We recognize that the landfill has been a toxic neighbor to families who are breathing in the noxious smells, whose mental and emotional health is being impacted, whose ability to gain equity and wealth in their homes is being impacted. We are also clear about one thing. The Brookhaven landfill is not solely a North Belport problem. Today, the Brookhaven landfill accepts the waste of approximately 2 million people or 660,000 households. Every year, around 700,000 tons of construction and demolition debris and 350,000 tons of incinerator ash are deposited into the Brookhaven landfill. This landfill is a linchpin in Long Island's regional waste infrastructure. And so all of us in this room, I would argue, are connected to the Brookhaven landfill. In our highly segregated Long Island, the landfill is one thing we all have in common. Our Brookhaven town elected officials in both political parties have historically embraced the landfill as a cash cow. It has been shielded from scrutiny because its net revenues account for a certain percentage of the town's operating budget. And so for decades, the complaints of the proximate communities have been brushed under the rug. When we understand that the Brookhaven landfill is part of our collective story, as we often say at BLARG, we realize it will take all of us to close the landfill and get it cleaned up. When the Brookhaven landfill completely closes, it will be because we have come together as a community and pushed our local and state governments to develop a rational, regional, and sustainable plan for waste management. In other words, we will have embraced our own power as a public and asked our elected officials to be in better relationship with our earth. When the Brookhaven landfill is finally cleaned up, it will be because we have come together as a community and pushed our governments to acknowledge the harm of the past decades and to prioritize economic, environmental, and social redress for those who have been impacted. In other words, it will be because we have embraced the importance of historical justice and been able to actually do that in our own setting, in our own communities. The existence of the Brookhaven landfill, which allows the town to profit from the cycle of burn and dump, has protected Covanta Energy, the multinational incinerator company operating on Long Island, from scrutiny. Now, Covanta is one of the biggest single polluters, one of the largest sources of emissions within New York State. So when the landfill finally closes, it will be because we care about leaving a habitable world for our grandchildren. The landfill closure is the impetus for developing and committing to a zero waste plan with clear and measurable targets for reducing and recycling our waste. It is an opportunity to put our abysmal recycling rates in the past, to roll up our sleeves and create a plan that actually allows us to be accountable for our waste. When the Brookhaven landfill finally closes, it will be because we have come to terms with where we are, when we are, what our power is as people, and have decided to be accountable for our impact on the earth. So you can see that BLARG's fight for justice for North Bellport is also a fight for a livable future for us all. It is a fight for an ethical relationship with our neighbors near and far, and with our earth. I would like to share a short video clip at this time of comments made by Supervisor Edward Romaine at last week's Long Island Metro Business Association meeting. After speaking about the solid waste crisis last week, the town supervisor opened himself up for a Q&A period. At that time, I asked a question about why environmental justice concerns were not a part of the supervisor's presentation, and specifically why the experience of North Bellport residents, was not a part of the supervisor's presentation and plan. So this was the supervisor's response to me. I will just share my screen at this time. And get to the right video clip.
People. Abena, for example, does not live in North Belport. She lives in Brookhaven Hamlet, in one of the wealthiest communities that we have on Long Island. So for her to speak for North Belport is somewhat disingenuous.
The supervisor's statement was that for me to speak for North Belport is somewhat disingenuous. Now, without attempting to single the supervisor out, I share these clips because it is rare to have such a clear distillation of how an impoverished sense of community can be weaponized to insulate the Brookhaven landfill and other injustices from criticism and to circumvent accountability. North Belport speaks for itself. North Belport has been speaking for itself for 50 years. When we as neighbors decide to join our voices with North Belport and speak for a just and sustainable transition to a fair waste infrastructure, that is the opposite of disingenuous. It is strategic community. For Supervisor Romaine, my home's location in Brookhaven Hamlet somehow invalidates my concerns about my neighbors. He drops my address as though the location of my home somehow makes it impossible for me to care about conditions that are past the end of the road. Perhaps the supervisor does not know that before I was a resident of Brookhaven Hamlet, I was a Black woman in America. And that for me, injustice, wherever it is found, is definitely always my business. Perhaps the supervisor does not know that long before I was a resident of Brookhaven Hamlet, I was a follower of a Middle Eastern teacher and mystic who posed the question, who is my neighbor, as a life ethic and a policy program. Perhaps the supervisor does not know that before I was a resident of North Belport, I was a resident of planet Earth. And that relationship requires that I speak out in defense of the Earth. One of my civil rights heroes, Grace Lee Boggs, a Detroit activist and revolutionary thinker, it is said, always used to ask comrades, friends, and advocates doing liberation and movement work this question: what time is it on the clock of the world? What time is it on the clock of the world? Now, Grace Lee Boggs posed this question as a way to challenge justice-minded people to consider if their strategies, if their choices were actually aligned with when and where we actually are within historical time. In some ways, right, this is the same question that the climate crisis youth activists have been shouting from the rooftops. How must we organize, live, travel? How must we feed ourselves, considering the clock of the world? So when I consider the clock of the world and what time it is, I believe it is time for the Brookhaven landfill to close and to be cleaned up. I believe it is time for the public within Suffolk County to have a sense of strategic community that requires that we speak up for our neighbors and understand that their fight is also our fight, that their liberation is also our freedom. So what time is it? UUFSB, what time is it on the clock of the world? Thank you.
Wow, Dr. Asare. Wow. Thank you for giving us so much information about this huge problem, which all Long Islanders contribute to each time we go to our trash cans, and real inspiration to check our watches and take action for change based on a foundation of interlocking freedom and strategic community. I must add that Blarg, which has well proven its ability to make a difference, is totally dependent on individual contributions for funding through their GoFundMe page, which is entitled Stop Environmental Racism on Long Island. You will find the direct link to this fund in our chat now, which you can copy for use to support this amazing coalition if you possibly can. Let's all raise our voices now and sing along with a very special group of singers, all the verses of hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. You're going to love this.
Justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are all genders together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are all genders together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our
you very much to all our singers, Ariana Cotter, Dan Weymouth, Tom and Isaac Allison, Maureen Shaman, Jessica and Melissa Pond. And a special thank you to Abena Asare for her marvelous presentation. The Brookhaven Town Board needs to implement a comprehensive Green Action Plan, or CGAP. A CGAP will not only strive toward the development of a more sustainable future, but also establish Brookhaven as a leader in environmental change and in undoing environmental racism, therefore serving as an example to other communities. All the residents of Brookhaven and Long Island need to be involved in this struggle. Majora Carter, who spearheaded the South Bronx Greenway Project, reminds us of the work before us with her words. That's how you know you did something right, when the power that's out there is afraid of the change you are going to make.
Thank you, Peggy. Now, as I extinguish this chalice, I'll share these words by the Reverend Krista Tavez. It's our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us together, in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirit. Amen and blessed be.
For our benediction, I offer these words from Denise Cawley. Love our earth. Take action to consume less, use less energy, respect water, and be cooperative, collaborative, and creative community. Like the moss and the mushrooms, our children's lives depend upon us. Enjoy our postlude, dear friends, and have a wonderful week. Please remain muted until the music is completed.
You can say that you stand apart, put a fence around your yard. You can build a tall rampart, guard it with a gun. You can dig yourself a moat, burn the bridge and burn the boat. It won't matter that much you know, 'cause all the world is one. All the world is one. You can march in a big parade every Independence Day. You can raise up your own flag and sing your own anthem. It will ring out in the air with all the other anthems they heard, until the winds of the earth declare that all the world is one. All the world is one. Go and ask the Buddha when he's sitting under a tree. Go ask Walt Whitman when he's looking out at the sea. And ask Alan Shepard when he's standing up on the beach and staring at that pearl of blue. Asking Adam in the breath you take. Ask the water by a river bank. Ask a strand of DNA, 'cause it's written in your blood. One life running in your veins. One light from one big bang. You can try and separate it, but all the world is one. All the world is one. when he's sitting under a tree. Ask Annie Dillard when she's up on Tinker Creek. And ask Alan Shepard when he's standing up and staring at that girl. You can take an outbound train, try and make a getaway. You can ride off like John Wayne into the setting sun. But earthlings don't leave town, we just go round and round until we figure out all the world is one. All the world is one. All the world is one. All the world is one, and all the world is one.